Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with a reading vlog that I think is going to be like the start of a series. It's going to be a very infrequent series, but basically there are some books that I don't like, but I feel like I would really enjoy retellings of that story. Like I just have this feeling that's what's going to happen, and the first one I want to do is Jane Eyre. I'm going to be reading some retellings of Jane Eyre. If you guys have seen my least favorite books of 2021 video, which if you're ever in the mood to like watch me complain about things for basically the length of a feature film almost, check it out. But yeah, one of my least favorite books was Jane Eyre. I DNF'd it when I was very young, and then I ended up having to read the whole thing for our Past at Classics live show, and I despised it. Like I gave it 2 stars. I will say I love Jane as a character, but pretty much everything else I like really loathed. I hate Mr. Rochester. He is one of the worst love interests I have ever read. I hate the overwriting. The book is like freaking boring. Like nothing happens. It's not connected with this like really toxic romance that makes me want to scream and throw things. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into it because I don't want to do a whole rant all over again, but basically I'm not a fan of Jane Eyre. I know a lot of people are. I'm sorry I'm not, but I'm just not. But I have a few retellings of that book that I think I'm going to like, and so this is kind of me testing that hypothesis. Like if there are, like if Jane Eyre is a book where I don't like the original, but like something about the story, like doing the story a different way, doing the characters a different way, could win me over. That's kind of what I'm thinking. And I actually have 4. There's one I'm going to do on audiobook, but the physical books I have Jane Eyre by Mimi Matthews. This is like a mystery kind of spooky atmospheric book, and it's gender swapped. I just realized I probably don't need to worry about summarizing these yet. I'll summarize them when I actually start the books. But yeah, we're following a male main character as like the Jane character instead, and then the Mr. Rochester character is actually a woman. I also have Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood. This is a Jane Eyre retelling. I think it's actually set in Ethiopia. I have heard really good things about this, so I'm very excited to get to this one. Also, I just realized it was blurbed by Jordan Ifueko, who is one of my new favorite authors. So that's promising as well. So I can't wait to get to that. And then the last physical one I have here is a book I've had for a very long time. That is My Plain Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. And this one is, I believe, a paranormal historical. And yeah, I think, what are the creatures involved? I think it's ghosts. Yeah, there's like ghosts in this one. So I'm curious to see how I get on with this one that's like spooky but also very humorous, I think. That's kind of the vibe I get, since My Lady Jane was also like really funny. So yeah, that's the other one. And then the audiobook that I'm gonna do, I'm laughing because I don't think I've heard anybody who liked this book, but I'm gonna try The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins, and that's because people don't like it. Because I think the reasons people don't like this one is because, for good reason, a lot of the people picking this book up really love Jane Eyre, so they want to read a retelling of Jane Eyre. Because I hate Jane Eyre, I am hoping that maybe I actually really enjoy this one. Like maybe they're going to change things that if you really love the story you don't like, but if you don't like the story you'll be okay with, you know? That's kind of the vibe I'm getting, and we'll see how it goes. I also don't do very many audiobooks. They're very hard for me, so we'll see how that goes as well. But like, yeah, this is just one that I would like to try, see how it goes, but I'm going in pretty mediocre expectations. So that's kind of the plan. I will check in when I have picked up one of these books. Hey everyone. Okay, so I am here for my first check-in. I apologize if the camera angle is a little inconsistent or shaky because I'm having to hold it at kind of a weird angle to like make the shot look reasonable. So apologies for that. But the first book that I started is Jane Eyre by Mimi Matthews. This is the gender-swapped Jane Eyre retelling. So obviously Jane Eyre is our main character, and he has been hired as a tutor for Mrs. Rochester's 2 wards. And she is a widow, and he has just gone to live and work there, and she has just come back to the house for the first time because she tends to be kind of an absent mistress of the house. And I'm about 100 pages into this one. Oops, sorry, keeps going out of frame. And I am enjoying it. As I suspected, I find Rochester much more palatable as a woman, because part of what I really don't like about him and Jane's interactions and relationship in the original is the gross power imbalance. I just don't feel like that's dealt with enough. I don't feel like their relationship wins me over enough to overlook that. And in this one, because it's not just with Rochester and Jane, it's not just that he's her employer, although that's part of it. It's also that because he's a man and she's a woman, there's already a power imbalance, and everything about the way they interact just kind of piles on top of that, for me at least. And in Jane Eyre, even though he is still employed by her, so there is still that difference in class, I think that's balanced out by the fact that he's a man and she's a woman, and so they feel like they're on more equal playing field, especially because she is a wealthy widow, which gives her just a different position in society. And I don't know, I just feel like that is working for me in this one a lot better than in the original, which, as I said, I kind of suspected would happen. So I think that's interesting. That's really working for me. The vibes of this one, like the atmosphere is definitely very spooky. We're starting to learn more about like what's going on, some things that are happening in the village, learning more about Stephen and Peter, I think are their names, who are the two young boys that John has charge of. And they're really interesting. I am interested to see where their characters go, and yeah, like I'm enjoying this. I will say that I'm not the biggest fan of the way John and Mrs. Rochester's relationship is being written right now. I just feel like the way that he keeps thinking of her body is just annoying to me. Like, it's not like completely out of line or anything. Like, he's not, I don't know, it's not the worst, but it just annoys me personally. And yeah, he keeps doing it, and I don't like that. There's also a little bit of the like not like other girls thing that John is putting on Mrs. Rochester in comparison to other women he has known, but it seems like that's more of a John thing than like a thing that the book is endorsing, so we'll see how that goes. And I don't dislike John. I think he's an interesting character. There are just a couple things about him where I'm like, I hope you improve as we go. This book also is dealing quite a bit with laudanum addiction, and I think that's interesting. I will be very curious to see how that continues to develop. There's a couple of directions that I hope we don't go with it based on some things that just happened, but from the way that Mimi Matthews seems to be handling it right now, I feel like she's gonna give it the attention it needs. So that's interesting, and yeah, like we'll just see how this goes. I probably, because I tend to ramble a lot, I probably will wait to check in again on this one until after I finished it. Maybe I will finish this tonight, we will see. But yeah, so I'm enjoying that. It's going well so far. The experiment is off to a good start. Also, I just realized that I probably was not looking at the camera the entire time. I was probably looking at the viewfinder instead. So I'm sorry for that. This angle, man, is not working for me. Hello, everybody. Okay, so I am back in with my next check-in. I did finish Jane Eyre by Mimi Matthews, and I feel like rating-wise, this is probably somewhere between a 3 stars and a 3.5 stars. So I did like things about it, but I'm a little disappointed, especially because I have really enjoyed other things by this author. So I did really like the take on the Jane Eyre story. Some of the ways that Mimi Matthews used parts of the original I think was really clever. Like, I think the secret keeping that happens in Jane Eyre actually makes sense in this book, unlike in the original, in my opinion. And as I said before, I find Mrs. Rochester much more interesting than Mr. Rochester, and much less unpleasant. I also think some of the thematic stuff is interesting. Like, as I was reading this, I felt like there was a kind of like through line that was about the importance of listening to women, like women who are in trouble, and I really like that, and that was confirmed by the acknowledgement section. Mimi Matthews talks about that very specifically, so I liked that. I also appreciate that in her author's note, she talks about like the toxicity of the like not like other girls idea, although I do think that she could have maybe done a better job of combating that in the story. Like, I don't feel like she fully made the point that she said she was making, but I do like that that was present. I can't remember if I mentioned this, but part of the book is following obviously John after he comes to the estate and everything, and then we also get what amounts to like flashback journal entries from Bertha Mason, who becomes Mrs. Rochester, and like chronicling her marriage and the degeneration of her marriage. And I thought those were actually really interesting. There was a point partway through where I actually started finding those sections more interesting than the present day sections, which usually doesn't happen for me. And I also think like the atmosphere and the creepiness was communicated very well. I also really loved Stephen and Peter. They're the two young boys that John ends up being the tutor for. I was very invested in them. They were probably the characters I was like most invested in and most worried for, but I really liked them. But as for this stuff I didn't like, really there's like 2 big problems I have with this book that kind of, well, okay, there's more than that, but like 2 significant ones in terms of page time. One is I never bought into the romance between John and Mrs. Rochester, and as with the original Jane Eyre novel, I feel like being invested in the main relationship is kind of important to the whole story. Like, the book is not just a romance, but that is a significant element of it, and it still didn't work for me here. Like I said, I found Mrs. Rochester interesting, but I didn't care about John really at all. I really liked him with Stephen and Peter. Those scenes with him were lovely, and I didn't dislike him, but like I just kept waiting for him to get more interesting or more developed, and I don't feel like that happened. I was also annoyed with the way he, and kind of Mrs. Rochester, but especially John, because it happens a lot, that he like thinks of Helen Burns. Like I thought the way she was incorporated was interesting, but I really didn't like the way that other characters talked about her. Especially given what happened to her and like what her marital situation was. Like I just really didn't like that. And John did that a lot. And yeah, like I was saying, just as a character, I found him pretty dull. Like Mrs. Rochester, I think was interesting enough that I could see why maybe he was interested in her, although he sure focused a lot on her physical appearance, which was annoying. But from Mrs. Rochester's side, I'm like, why do you care about this man? I just don't get it. So that was one thing. And then the other big thing is, like I was saying, John himself. For him being the main character, I really wasn't very invested in him personally. I cared about him getting out okay. I wanted him to do all right. But as a character, I wasn't super invested in him. And then also, like I was saying, some of the way the other female characters were handled, not my favorite. But yeah, I did like the creepiness. I thought the retelling aspect was interesting. And as I was saying, I think thematically this book does some really interesting things. I also appreciate that there is a reference to a character making their money in the West Indies, and then that reality is actually dealt with. I liked that, even though that was a somewhat minor part of the story. I appreciated that. Yeah, so that's kind of my overall review. Like I said, between 3 and 3.5 stars. And I think after I finish each book, there's kind of like 3 questions that I'm going to address in order to determine if this experiment is a success or if my hypothesis was correct. And that is 1, did I like the book more than Jane Eyre? 2, are the things I liked and disliked about the book, are those the same as in Jane Eyre? I'll explain that when I get there. And then 3rd, do I think you would have a different experience with this book if you really love the original novel? Like, basically would I recommend this for people who do really love Jane Eyre? And as for the first question, I definitely enjoyed this more than Jane Eyre. Second question about like which parts I liked and disliked. I think it's funny because the parts that I disliked in this one are somewhat similar in that it's the main romance and one of the main characters, which are some of the things I dislike most about the original novel, but for different reasons. Because as I was saying, the power imbalance in Jane Eyre I find really disgusting, and this book dealt with that a lot better, I think. But John Eyre was just like a very underdeveloped character. And then, like I was saying, I wasn't sold on the romance. So like similar problems, but for very different reasons. The reason I think this question is interesting is because like my theory is that there are things about the original novel I could like, but if they're combined with other things. And in the case of this book, I would tentatively say that is correct because the overall like premise of the original novel is something that worked a lot better for me here. I feel like I'm explaining this so much that it makes less sense. And then my 3rd question that I'm answering is, do I think you would enjoy this book if you love Jane Eyre? I don't know. I'm not sure you would, actually, because depending on the reasons, like if you really love Mr. Rochester and the romance in Jane Eyre, I don't think you would like this book. Because Mr. Rochester is clearly not supposed to be a sympathetic figure here, which obviously wasn't a problem for me. And also, like, I think, like I was saying, Jane Eyre as a main character is one of the things that I liked best about the original novel, and her substitute character here is John, and I don't think he was written very well. So probably if you're a huge fan of the original novel, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this one, unless you're like specifically interested in a retelling that plays with some kind of supernatural, like spookiness and that kind of thing. But I did have a reasonably good time with this, so first book is done. Probably the one I'll pick up next will be My Plain Jane. I feel like I want to save Within These Wicked Walls for last because that's the one that I feel most confident about enjoying. When I say last, I mean of those 3, because I'm still thinking I might try and listen to the audiobook for The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins, but we will see. Also, I feel like this is probably going to be a vlog that doesn't have a lot of B-roll. So if that appeals to you, then you're in luck. Just because I clearly am going to ramble for these books even more than usual. But anyway, I will see you guys for my next check-in, whenever that is. I have no idea when it will be. Hopefully soon. Hey everyone, so I am back with another update, and also to say that probably, like I said this in the last clip, I think, but I really think this vlog will mostly be just me talking about the books. I know some people like a lot more like B-roll and like, you know, things like that, but that's taking more energy than I think I have right now. And like last night I had a pretty severe anxiety attack not filming related or anything, but that's just kind of taken it out of me. Although last night did make me realize that I think I finally need to go back to therapy, which is gonna be good. Like, I'm dreading having to like start that process again. I haven't been in a very long time, but I think it's gonna be good for me. And yeah, the reason I'm mentioning it here is because like I know that I can sometimes, it can make me feel more seen and a little better if other people are talking about this kind of thing. And so I just want to do my part to reduce the stigma, because it's not something to be ashamed of, and I'm not ashamed of it. And I need to give that grace to myself that I give to other people. You know, like I never judge other people who say that they're, you know, going to therapy or like whatever it is, to seek help. And so I want to reflect that in my own actions as well. So yeah, even just making the decision is like a pretty big step for me. So I think that's going to be a good call. And I hope that if you've been, I know that not everybody can get professional help like this, but I hope that if you've been thinking about maybe doing something that you need to do to take care of yourself, but you don't really want to do it, you've kind of been putting it off like I have, maybe this can be the sign to go ahead and do that. As I said, I know that not everyone can seek out the same kind of help, but I hope that you're able to do at least something for yourself. So there's a lot of horrible things happening in the world right now, so I hope you're taking care of yourself as much as possible. And now I'm going to get into the book update, which is thankfully a very positive one, because I did finish the rest of My Plain Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. I genuinely can't remember if I even updated you guys when I started this. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. So I'm going to summarize it a little bit just in case. But this is the second book in the Lady Janies series, which is by these 3 authors, and they're taking basically famous Jane characters from history or literature and giving them a better story and a better life and a better ending, which I love. I really enjoyed My Lady Jane, but then I read My Contrary Mary, which is the first in like a similar series they're doing, and I DNF'd it. So I was kind of nervous about this one, especially because I haven't heard great things about this book as compared to My Lady Jane, but I loved it. I think I loved it even more than My Lady Jane. So this is obviously Jane Eyre retelling, which is why it's in this video. And we're following 3 different perspective characters. One of them is Jane Eyre herself. And then one of them, I think arguably the primary main character, although they split the book equally, but I kind of think of her as the main character, is actually Charlotte Bronte, who of course is the author of Jane Eyre. So in this book, her and Jane are friends, and she's writing a story based on Jane's experiences, which is like the Jane Eyre novel. And I thought that was like a fun touch. And then Alexander is the other character, and he is with the Society for, what is it? Let me get the name. Society for the Relocation of Wayward Spirits, because all the books in this series have had a kind of fantasy element, and this one is like a paranormal element with ghosts. And the 3 of them, their paths end up crossing because Jane ends up going off as a governess, and Charlotte thinks that's a bad idea. She thinks there's something weird going on with this situation and this Mr. Rochester guy, and her and Alexander are... Alexander's trying to get her to join the society because Jane can see spirits, and that's something that's obviously very valued and very necessary in the society. And Charlotte's going after her to rescue, you know, her best friend, one of her best friends, and also to try and finish her novel. And I just loved this so much. Like, I really enjoyed our 3 main characters. There is like a hint of a romance that I really enjoyed. It's very, very subtle, but I really liked it. I think the paranormal aspects were done in really interesting ways. I love the way that Helen Burns was used in this story. Like, that just filled my heart. I continue to really enjoy the humor and this very interesting blend of like very like deliberately historically inaccurate, but in a way that is so honest about it that it kind of becomes useful historical information anyway, if that makes sense. The humor is going to be very hit or miss for people. I don't remember, it's been such a long time since I read My Lady Jane that I don't remember if this book has more of that or less of that, but I personally enjoyed it. I don't feel like they overdid it. And also just the premise of this one, like, this is the second book I've read in a row for this vlog where like part of the premise could be summed up as like, do you think Mr. Rochester is the worst? Here is a book for you. So I think it's not surprising that I got on with that part of this book, but I was not expecting to enjoy the other aspects so much. Also, I'm just going to read you part of the blurb on this one, so spoilers for Jane Eyre if you haven't read that, but you may think you know the story. After a miserable childhood, penniless orphan Jane Eyre becomes a governess at Thornfield Hall. There, she meets one dark, brooding Mr. Rochester. Despite their significant age gap, yikes, and his uneven temper, double yikes, they fall in love. And, reader, she marries him. We have a different story to tell. So that right there, I was like, yes, I'm a fan. And I ended up really, like, the fact that this book made me love Charlotte Bronte as a character, I think was also a nice bonus, because I'm not the biggest fan of Charlotte Bronte as an author or as a person, so this was a really nice change from that. Also, the ending of this was absolutely lovely. Like, there was like this one scene that like brought tears to my eyes, and I just really like that even though this is a very like wacky and funny story in a lot of ways, there is still this emotional heart to it, which I just really enjoy. So I really liked that. Like, really my only complaint is there was a part of the climax and the resolution that I think it felt like it dragged longer than it needed to. Like, this is a somewhat chunky book, it's around 450 pages, but it didn't feel long except near that part, like at that part near the end where it's kind of like, I think we could have spent less time on this, but that might also be personal preference. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. As for answering my 3 questions, did I enjoy this more than Jane Eyre? Absolutely, yes. What was my second one? Gosh. Oh, what parts did I enjoy and why? I guess you could sum that up. And this one, even though it incorporates the actual novel Jane Eyre, and Charlotte Bronte as a character and everything, including, and also Jane Eyre as another character, I feel like the story of this one is probably more separated definitely than the last book that I read in this vlog. So like, this is a much more loose, I think, take on the Jane Eyre story, which may be why I liked it so much, because it was really more about like the vibes and the general premise and the time period. Like, those were really the only things that I think were kept the same. Characterization was in some cases kind of different, or pretty different, and obviously the plot and the added paranormal aspect was very different. And also the book's take on the Mr. Rochester character and like that whole romance was obviously very different. Although I would say, this is kind of getting into question number 3, which is like, who would I recommend this for? Or do I think you need to dislike Jane Eyre in order to enjoy this book? I would say for this one that actually, like, probably like the other book I was talking about, if you're like ride or die for Jane and Rochester, maybe you would not enjoy this one very much. But if you like their romance, but you're open to different perspectives on it, I think you might still like it. And there was a part of it actually, the way that that relationship was done, that surprised me. And I actually think it worked really well. So I don't know, take that as you will. As for the other stuff, because this is so different from the original novel, I'm not sure I would recommend this if you are a huge lover of Jane Eyre, which maybe is why this book has such low ratings. But I really enjoyed it. It was obviously something that really worked for me. I can't remember if I said this, but I gave My Plain Jane 4.5 stars. So this reading vlog experiment is so far, I think, a tremendous success. I'm very excited to read Within These Wicked Walls, and I probably am going to try and tack on The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins whenever I'm going to try and do that one on audio. So whenever that hold comes in from my library again, because I actually had it and I didn't feel like reading it, so I just didn't. So I don't know where I was going with that, but I think this vlog is going well. And I feel good about that because, like, it's nice to have a theory about your taste proven correct. Obviously, I am picking ones that I feel like I'm gonna like. This isn't just like a random sampling of Jane Eyre retellings. But still, I feel like this is going well. Also, I've had this book for quite a long time now, for several years, so I feel good to have finally read it, and I enjoyed it so much that, like, I had been thinking that I wanted to try the My Calamity Jane one, which is like a Western. It's like Annie Oakley and... oh my gosh, I can't remember who the other... Calamity Jane, oh my gosh, it's like in the actual title. Good job, Kara. But anyway, that's another one that I've heard like not great reviews for, but I've been thinking I wanted to try it. After loving this, I think I am gonna try it. So anyway, this was a really long update. I'm like really in the mood to do like secret reading stuff. I don't know, maybe because it makes me feel like I can ignore my currently reading shelf on Goodreads and it's being productive. So there you go. So I will see you guys when I have something to report. Hey guys, so finally here with another check-in. I can't remember if I had said last time that I started The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins, but I have since finished it, and oh boy, this was like gonna be, I think, the most interesting one on the list, or like the most, I don't know, potential for dramatic opinions. I don't know what I'm saying here. But like I have heard from people I follow basically nothing but negative reviews, but the things I had heard about it made me think that because I don't like the original Jane Eyre, I might get on with it better. And for a while that was true. This was like a solid like 3-star probably book for me for most of it, especially after I switched from the audiobook to the ebook, because I I know at least a few people I've seen have enjoyed the audio narrators. The one for Jane, the main character, did the most obnoxious character voice I have ever had to listen to. It was horrible. Like, every single line from her was like read the same. It was like this very like snotty, like angry in the exact same way. Like, it felt so repetitive. It was like, and there is Emily, and she is walking her dog in that way that makes you think that her favorite color is probably pink. I hate Emily, even though she's the nicest of the girls. Like, I am not exaggerating when I say that everything out of this narrator's mouth was said in exactly the same voice. And it was an annoying choice anyway, but it also made it very hard to like Jane or care about her or connect to her as a character. So that was not fun. I really didn't like that narrator. So it went a lot better when I switched to the ebook. And I can't remember if I even like summarized this one. So this is obviously a Jane Eyre retelling. It is a contemporary kind of domestic thriller, sort of, I guess. And our main character is Jane, who is on the run from things that we don't really know about. She's kind of trying to lay low from like foster situations and other kind of things in her past. And she's a dog walker for several families in this like very, very wealthy enclave. And she ends up running into Eddie Rochester, whose wife and her best friend died very tragically in possibly suspicious circumstances like a few months ago. And so Jane sees this as her ticket out of being poor and like strikes up a relationship with him, uses it to kind of ingratiate herself with the community, and she does start developing feelings for him as well. And then we start learning more about like the backstory of like Eddie and his wife, how they met, his wife and her friend. I'm sorry, I can't remember the other one's name. I actually had a hard time keeping track of who was B and who was the other one that also started with the B, because they were used in very similar scenes and in very similar ways, and it was just very hard to keep track of which character was which, especially because I wasn't like completely loving the book or the characterization. But we start learning more about like their past as well. And like I said, this was okay for a while. I did actually feel sympathy for Jane, especially again once I stopped listening to the narrator. Like, she's not a super likable character. She is kind of unpleasant, but I kind of like understood why she would be so desperate to escape her situation. Like, that made sense to me, and I wanted to see her succeed at it, honestly. I don't think she has much resemblance to Jane Eyre, the character, like from the original novel, which is kind of a bummer because that was one of the only things I liked about the original novel, but it was okay. That wasn't like a huge detractor for me. And so this was like very fine. I thought like the setting was kind of interesting. It's like supposedly like a Southern Gothic in this like wealthy like neighborhood, and I think some of that was interesting. And then what really like completely ruined this book for me, to the point where I gave it 1.5 stars, I hated this book, was the ending. Like, I can't talk about the specific reasons without spoiling everything. So I will put a timestamp if you don't want to hear that, but here we go. So the reason I hated it so much is because I think one of my least favorite tropes in any kind of media is the like plot twist where it's like, oh, this male character who has all of these huge red flags about like being abusive and dangerous and like hurting people, guess what? He was actually the victim all along. I hated that twist. I hated the twist that his wife was the evil one all along. And I guess he was kind of complicit in some of it, but like, if that was going to be the twist, I think they both should have been really evil, you know? Like, it left such a bad taste in my mouth to finish this book, and like the plot twist was like, don't listen to your instincts, ladies. I really hate that. It really, really makes me angry when this is used in storytelling, so this is what ruined the book for me. Like, I wasn't having a great time with the other parts of it. Like I said, characterization was pretty flat. There were some like kind of repeated plot points that were pretty annoying, even though I understand why they were repeated for the story. But I wasn't like hating it. And there was actually a chunk of the book where I got a lot more invested, and I was reading it very quickly, and I was actually interested in seeing how things played out. And then everything got ruined by that ending. It really, really just wrecked the book for me. Yeah, so that's my that's my next update. I only have one book left, which is Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood, which, as I said, is one that I think was the one I was the most confident about enjoying. So it'll be interesting to see if that is correct. But yeah, just one book to go. So I will check in when I've made progress in that. Hello everybody, I am back with an update. We're actually nearing the end of this reading vlog. Very exciting. I feel like I've been filming this for ages. But I have started Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood. I'm actually almost 2/3 of the way done, so I definitely can finish this soon. Probably my last check-in for this one will just be when I finished. But this is the Jane Eyre retelling that is set in Ethiopia. Our main character is named Andromeda, or she also goes by Andy, and she's a Debtra, which means that she cleanses houses from like evil spirits. And of course the house that she's currently at, that she's working on, is, I forget what they actually name the house, but it's like the equivalent of Thornfield Manor. And there are a lot of like evil spirits there that she has to get rid of, that she has to cleanse. And so she gets there and then she realizes that it's more dangerous than she thought. There's more going on than she thought. And she also starts spending a lot more time with her employer, who's a young man named Magnus. And they start growing closer as well, although there's obviously like conflict between them. The employer-employee thing for one, but also like other issues between them. And I am really enjoying this. I really like the setting. I really like Andromeda as a main character. I'm enjoying the plot. Like, I find that very interesting. There's definitely been some creepy moments. And I am liking Magnus. I didn't love him like as much as I was hoping to. Like, just based on what people had said about the romance in this book, I thought I would have like a stronger like first impression of him, but I'm not, like, I didn't dislike him, and he was still way better than Mr. Rochester. But it wasn't until more recently in the book that I started like actually really enjoying him, and getting more invested in his and Andromeda's relationship. So I am really liking this, and I'm looking forward to finishing it, which, like I said, I think that'll be the next thing I do before I check in again. So I will check in once I've done that. In terms of other things to do today, I've had a pretty productive morning and early afternoon, which is good. I am gonna try and do some video things. I also have like obviously some reading to do. I did film a Friday Reads video, so I will be hopefully editing that, captioning it, getting it all ready to go up tomorrow, because tomorrow is Friday. So I will see you guys when I have something to report. Hey everyone! Okay, so I have finished the final book, but before I get into that, I realized that I forgot to do my 3 questions thing for The Wife Upstairs. So very quickly, the first question, did I like it more than Jane Eyre? No, but barely. Like, I barely disliked this book more than Jane Eyre. I went over the whole ending and all of that, so I did not end up enjoying that book. But in terms of, I don't know, it's like, I think I still take Jane Eyre more personally though, because like it's so beloved, you know? And I feel like it doesn't, like for me it doesn't live up to that, but technically I do dislike The Wife Upstairs more. Second question is, did I like or dislike the same things? And yes, actually, I think I did for the most part. Like, the big issue I had was the ending, and there are parts of Jane Eyre's ending that really bother me, specifically connected to Mr. Rochester. And my biggest issue with The Wife Upstairs was with the ending and the characterization of Rochester specifically. So I would actually say that for the most part, those were the same. I do think that I didn't love the main character of The Wife Upstairs, and like I said, Jane Eyre as a main character is one of the only things I did really enjoy about the novel. But I would say overall, yes, I think my dislikes were kind of the same, although for unexpected reasons. And then, do I think your experience would be better or worse if you love the novel? Like if you love the original, I mean. I don't know, because as I said, I had heard like no good things about it from people I follow, and I do think most of the people I follow like enjoy Jane Eyre, but it's hard to tell. Like, the overall Goodreads rating is much higher than I expected, which I am very surprised at. So I don't really know. I think that overall, I would say the more you like the original novel, the less likely you are to enjoy this book. But obviously in my case, the fact that I don't like Jane Eyre didn't really help me enjoy this novel, although that was for specific reasons that were not connected to the retelling aspect really. So I guess my recommendation would be, if you really love Jane Eyre, probably you wouldn't like The Wife Upstairs, is my guess at least. Or at least I think it would be unlikely. And then if you don't like it, it depends on why. If you are looking for a book that really criticizes the central romance, I am not sure that you're gonna get that. It's like, that was one of the things I was looking for from The Wife Upstairs, and it didn't end up doing it at all in the way that I wanted. So if that's what you dislike about the original, I'm not sure you would enjoy this. like the wife upstairs. I hope that made sense, that that wasn't too confusing. So now getting into wrapping up my last book, which is Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood. I'm pretty sure I already summarized it, so yeah, I finished it and I really liked it. I'm gonna give this one 4 stars. As I said, I really like Andromeda as a main character. I liked the setting. I thought the creepy atmosphere and like instances were done really well, and I did end up enjoying the love interest more. I do still think I wanted maybe a little bit more from their romance, but overall I liked their relationship, and some of the side characters, like their characterization and where the story went with those, really surprised me. I do think there were some confusing transitions like between scenes, and there were also some confusing parts where I wasn't sure which characters knew which things. It's possible that I just missed something, you know, that the book wasn't written confusingly and it was just me who missed something. But that did happen a few times, and I wonder if maybe it is partly the book, because as I said, I think some of the transitions were also kind of confusing or messy in some places. But overall, I did like the writing. I did really enjoy this book. And as I said, I gave it 4 stars. Okay, so in terms of my 3 questions, did I like this more than Jane Eyre? Yes, definitely, absolutely. Not a surprise, as most of the books I've read for this vlog have been yes. And then the second question is, were my likes and dislikes the same? No, they were actually very different. I think that, I definitely think also that this is one of the retellings that is the most separate from the original story, so maybe that's partly why. Maybe that's one reason I enjoyed it, but also a reason why my likes and dislikes were so different. The only thing that's really the same, I feel like, is the fact that I like Jane and I like Andromeda. Like, the main character was something that I enjoyed in both cases, but otherwise there's not a lot in common for me, because I liked this romance a lot better. I liked the overall plot a lot better in Within These Wicked Walls. I thought that like the setting and everything was interesting. I can't remember if I mentioned this, but the other thing that I did like about Jane Eyre was some of the social commentary on class and beauty and goodness. But even that, like, I don't feel like it did as great a job as I wanted it to. So, but that is something that I liked about the original. And in terms of this novel, I think it does still have like definitely a lot of depth and complexity, especially in some of the relationships. Although I will say that with Andromeda and the love interest, I kind of wanted, like, I think their back and forth happened maybe a little too much. It was a little frustrating at times, but overall I did like the complexity of the relationships and the characters here. And there was a little bit of a discussion on class and beauty, but I think for the most part the like commentary and the like explorations in this book were mainly about characters and relationships and how messy and complicated that is. Also about like abuse and like being tied to people, like loving people, all of that. So there definitely was that complexity in this book, but I feel like it was mostly in a different direction than Jane Eyre was. So I don't know if that would count as being similar or not, but anyway. Yeah, so I really enjoyed this one. Let's do my final ranking now. So this is not going to be a surprise, I think, if you've been following the ratings as I've gone through the vlog. But starting from the bottom and working our way up, my least favorite was The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins for very different reasons than I expected. Or not even that I expected it. Like I said, that I had not heard much good things about this one, like really any. But I thought the reasons were because people didn't like the Jane and Rochester relationship, which is one of my least favorite things about Jane Eyre, so I thought maybe I would be a good audience for this, and I was not. Like, it was very mediocre for me until the ending, which I hated and ruined everything and makes me very, very, very angry. So 1.5 stars. Didn't have a good time and wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Like, obviously there are some people who liked it. It has a much higher rating on Goodreads than I expected, but I don't really know who to recommend it to because I personally don't think it was well done, like, as a retelling, as a thriller, although granted I don't read a ton of thrillers, and I also just don't think it was a well done story. Then in second place, I would give Jane Eyre by Mimi Matthews. I can't remember if I gave this 3 or 3.5 stars. It's like somewhere in the middle for me. There were good parts. I definitely liked the commentary on like listening to women and like violence against women and all of that. I liked some of the atmosphere. I thought the way that Mimi Matthews interpreted Jane Eyre and like gender swapped it and just did some interesting things with it. I thought that was, you know, very interesting. And the like supernatural like question or element of this book I think was also interesting. But I didn't really love John as a protagonist. Like I just kept wanting more from him. And I also didn't love the main romance, which is, you know, kind of a decent chunk of this book. John and Bertha had, I feel like they had a couple scenes together that I liked, but overall I just wasn't super invested, and it also irritated me the way like John just kept thinking about how beautiful she was, and there was also a little bit of a not like other girls thing in the way he thought about her and in the way other female characters were kind of treated or how things went with them. I do think sometimes the book comments on that, but not enough to balance out, I feel like, what it said in the story, or what happened in the story. I did like the young boys that John tutors. I really liked their characters. I was very invested in them. But overall, this was just kind of fine for me. I'm glad I read it, but I didn't have like strong feelings about it. And then surprisingly in second place, because as I said, this is the one that I expected to enjoy more or most, is Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood, which I did still very much enjoy. I gave it 4 stars. I just wrapped this one up, so I'm sure you guys remember, but I thought the setting and the atmosphere was great. Really loved Andromeda. Her relationship with the love interest also won me over. And I really liked the depth and complexity of the relationships and like how complicated these were, like the way this book deals with like trauma and abuse and love and sometimes loving people against your better judgment and all of that. So I did really enjoy this one. The only thing that really kept this from being higher was, as I was saying, some parts were like a little confusing in terms of the transitions and also like some of the secrets and who knew what. I was a little confused about that. And then also with the relationship, the main romance, I did end up being invested in it and liking it, but I wanted maybe a little bit more out of it. And I also think the back and forth there happened maybe a little too much. But overall, very good. Very glad I read this. And this is the first book I think I've read that is set in Ethiopia. And I really enjoyed that aspect as well. And then surprisingly in first place, I think I have to give that to My Plain Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. Yeah, like I just was very pleasantly surprised by this one. I can't believe I was won over to even a fictional version of Charlotte Bronte as a character, because we know I have my issues with her. But I really enjoyed the main characters. I really loved this romance, although it is very subtle, so don't go in expecting that to be a big part of the plot, but I really enjoyed it. I liked the way the paranormal elements were used. I personally really enjoyed the humor. And I also really love the way this book talks about grief and letting go. Like, I did not expect the end of this book to make me cry, because even though I'm a crier, I just did not expect that kind of emotional impact from the way it handles these like ghosts and all of that. Yeah, and I also really like the way it commented on the problematic aspects of the original novel. And it did it in unexpected ways, actually. So even if, like, I think I said this in my wrap up for this book, or my like final check-in for it, but I would venture that maybe even if you love the original novel, you might still give this one a try, because even though it does comment on some things that I have a problem with in Jane Eyre, I feel like the way it does it is not always in the way you expect, maybe, but I know this doesn't get great reviews, so I guess I shouldn't recommend it too strongly, because clearly not a lot of people enjoyed it, but I really did, and I gave My Plain Jane 4.5 stars. I enjoyed it even more than My Lady Jane. Okay, so was this vlog a success? In terms of did I enjoy most of the books, yes, it definitely was a success. And then also in terms of my hypothesis, I think it was, because I think like my overall idea was that despite not liking Jane Eyre, there were elements of the story that I could like if they were done in a different way. And I think that is true. Obviously, I really enjoyed 2 of these retellings. One of them I, more or less enjoyed, and then only one of the 4 I really, really didn't like. I guess the title of this vlog is a little bit misleading because I wasn't really trying to change my feelings on the original novel. I was more just interested in, is this feeling that I have that I could still like Jane Eyre retellings, even though I don't like Jane Eyre, is that feeling correct? And I think that feeling is obviously correct. Or, my feelings on if I would like a Jane Eyre retelling is more often correct than incorrect. And even with The Wife Upstairs, that one was one that I knew there was a chance I wouldn't enjoy because I had heard so many negative things. So I did pick it up, but it wasn't one of the ones that I genuinely was really interested in and thought I would really enjoy, So I think that's everything. I hope this was fun or interesting, and I apologize again for not liking Jane Eyre. I feel like I fail so many people by not enjoying that book, but I did like some retellings of it. And yeah, let me know if you have read any of these books and if you also enjoyed them, or let me know if you also hated The Wife Upstairs and if it was for the same reasons I did, because I was very surprised that wasn't something that more people had an issue with. So yeah, just talk to me in the comments. Let me know what you thought about any of these books, or if you're planning to read them. Let me know if you're somebody who does read retellings. Let me know if there's anything like this for you, where like you don't love the original, but you feel like you would enjoy retellings, or maybe you have actually enjoyed retellings. So as I said, this is going to be the start of kind of an unofficial series or an infrequent series. So hopefully you enjoyed this. I really do hope so, because I'm probably going to do it anyway. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!